JD, welcome to my channel. Here we're going to clean and lubricate a watch balance. It's a pocket watch balance with a balance cock. I'm just showing you my new finger cuts I got the other day. They're pretty good, although they cut off the circulation in the fingers, so I'm not sure if I work too hard on the watches whether my finger is going to drop off after a little while. But I'm making sure that I make use of the 400 finger cuts that came in this pile of finger cuts. So we have a balance for a 21 jewel Hamilton pocket watch that I'm working on, and I've got it on the balance tack right now. And if you look at the balance tack I bought that from China, and it's actually not a bad balance tack, but I also included a little piece of leather, like faux leather, on the top of that resting area for the balance, just so the balance would in fact be resting on something that wasn't metal, with a hole in the middle. So that's what I did. I did notice the screw was missing on the piece of Rodico, and I hope it's the screw that's on the mat, and I don't have another issue looking for the screw and where it went, because it should be on that nice little piece of Rodico that's stuck onto that balance tack. So the first thing I need to do is actually, this balance, the stud is held in by a bar, and the bar goes all the way across where that stud goes in. And I just have to loosen the two screws on the top and slide that stud out, because what I want to do here is take the hairspring out completely, so that I can clean that hairspring after it's off the actual balance cock. So I'm using a screwdriver. My screwdriver I used was a bit too big. You don't want to strip the threads. You want to make sure that the screwdriver is the right size. And just use and make sure you're actually like, what's the word called? I think it's called, it's not trimming your screwdrivers, it's making sure your screwdriver blades are flat on the end and the right angle completely. There's a word for that. I'll think of it later, and I'll add that to the video. So you want to make sure you do that, and then all I did here is just reach in from the inside and then grab that stud and slide it out, and it'll slide out. The regulator pins are there too, and when you're doing work on this watch, you really have to pay attention to those regulator pins, that you don't squish them or touch them or do anything else. So I make sure that I don't touch that balance or the hairspring, so it goes from where it was to into the cleaning device that you're going to see in a few seconds, to clean that hairspring. It's actually a simple job to clean the hairspring and the balance, and you can do it all in one shot. And here I want to put that balance with the hairspring into this bottle cap. So it's the right size, so you don't waste too much lighter fluid by using a bigger device. I know in my dunker tank, I have a cap that I use in my dunker tank that I could use, but it's a bit bigger than this. So again, I'm using lighter fluid I don't need to use in the cleaning exercise. So here I'm taking some leather. I think this is actual leather, and I'm just fashioning a small piece of leather to put on the bottom of this cap. Now the reason I'm doing that is when I rest the balance into this cap for cleaning, I want to make sure that the pivot on the bottom is not subjected to any metal on metal as it's sitting in there, right? So although it might not be a huge problem and most people wouldn't really care about it, my level of perfection requires me to do this. So I'll put that in like that and just rest it there. Now I know the pivot is safely resting on that piece of leather, and then I can go get the lighter fluid. And here we go. There's a can of Zippo. I was going to say a bottle, but it's a can of Zippo lighter fluid. I find this is the best lighter fluid to use for cleaning the balance. All the other watch parts and stuff I now clean in my cleaning machine, and I'm using proper L&R cleaning liquid and L&R rinsing liquid for my cleaning machine. But the lighter fluid does not affect the shellac that would be used to attach that impulse jewel on the bottom into that roller table here. So it doesn't impact the shellac one bit. And when you rest that the balance into that cap, and you just let the lighter fluid interact with the balance, it gets rid of the crud. And what I also do, so if there's oil on the hairspring or anything else on that hairspring, it's going to dissolve that and allow that to drop into the cap. And what I also do is I agitate this, right? So I want to agitate that using a blower, and I just basically want to bubble up the lighter fluid a bit. Now, just make sure you're in an area that you're not going to splash lighter fluid all over the place, because that's not a good thing to do. So here I'm just, probably should be sucking air when it's out of the lighter fluid and then pushing it out the other way, which I've just realized at that moment. So here I'm agitating just a bit. You don't need to do a lot of that, and making sure that the lighter fluid gets in between the leaves of the hairspring as the hairspring concentrically rotates around. And there we go. So that's pretty much it. And this will dry off really fast. I've got watchmaker's paper on the bottom that I'm using to basically clean off the end, get the lighter fluid out of that blower. And then this is set aside for just, it'll sit there for almost half an hour. And I'll let that sit there and clean off any grease or dirt that was on that. So now I need to work on the balance cock itself, and that's my little piece of faux leather that I put on top of there. That was put on there before with some kind of glue, but let's get to work on that balance cock itself. Alrighty then, so the first thing I need to do is remove the jewel and the cap jewel. It's the jewel setting and the cap jewel from this balance cock, and remove it safely. And then note the position of that jewel setting and the position of the cap jewel. So what I'm making sure here is that the regulator pins are free from touching the block I'm using right now, because those regulator pins can bend, and they're a little bit lower than the bottom of that balance cock. So if you put them on a mat or something, you're going to squish them. So you have to have them off. You have to have them dropping down into a hole like I'm doing here. That's the proper way to do it. And then I've got my screwdriver right size and making sure I'm unscrewing that properly. Still can't remember what that word is, what I do with those screwdrivers. What is that word? Yeah, you got to let me know before the end of the video. So anyway, it's not trim, it's some other word. Oh my God. Oh me, oh my. So here I'm removing the screws, and I'm actually putting them aside again, and like I always do, I put them back in the same hole they came from. So when I put them on the mat, I make sure they're in that order. So I put the screws one on top of the other. You can see a bit of my work in the upper right hand corner, but some of it's not readily available. So here I've got the screws out, and I'm just taking a look at what I've got here to deal with. I just tried to see if that cap is loose at all, right? And it's not. So just try to do that, because I've removed these caps before with 2 screwdrivers. It just makes the job a bit easier for cleaning, but it's not loose, so I've got to punch this out. There's a few things you can do to punch it out. You can punch it out with a piece of pegwood, which I've done in other videos, and usually it's on the plate, not the balance cock, but on one of the plates. But I used the pegwood here, and I push down, and if it's punch outable, then that it'll happen on the mat here, because I've got a little bit of sponge on the mat, and it works quite well to punch that out. But I think that I realized quite quickly that I'm not going to be able to punch this out with a piece of pegwood. That's a safe way of doing it. If you're lucky, in this case, it didn't budge one bit. So we're going to go to my seats jeweling tool here, and we're going to punch this out properly with using a jeweling tool. So this is a very, very good jeweling tool. I actually have 2 of them, just in case one of them disappears. So it's a seats jeweling tool, S-E-I-T-Z, I believe is how it's spelled. And you just have to assemble the jeweling tool appropriately. And after you'll see me assembling it, there's all the stumps that you have, and there are different types of stumps here. Some are self-centering on a jewel and are for jeweling. There's reamers on the bottom, as you can see. If I say the bottom over to the right-hand side, are where the reamers are. So I want to pick a stump that fits in that over the setting, that does not interfere with the jewel itself. So it's actually only touching the setting. and this one is too big and the previous stump was perfect. So this is a little bit of Goldilocks and a three bear happening with watchmaking. So this is a perfect size, and it's got the hole in the middle, which means there's no pressure at all from the center of that pusher. It's not the stump, it's the pusher. So, but I do have to pick a stump. So you see in the bottom of that jeweling tool, as it says, made in Switzerland. Switzerland. I told you folks that I was half Swiss, didn't I? I think I did. I'm related to the Wildes. My mom was a Wilde, and they were watchmakers. There you go. So there we go. And actually, the Wilde started the school of watchmaking in the U.S. So I could be related to the gentleman who started that school of watchmaking. So here I'm attaching the lever incorrectly, and I turn it around and go, okay, you dough head, put it on the right way. And it just pushes down like that. Now, if you look at that, if you're lucky, it'll reach all the way to the bottom, but you can't do this without a stump on the bottom. I kind of realized it in a few seconds as I put that in and saw how far down it goes, and said, okay, I need some sort of a stump on the bottom to allow this to reach the lowest level, right? Because it ain't going to work like this. See? There you go. It doesn't work like that. And there's all kinds of different stumps that are used when using a jeweling set, depending on what you're doing. Here I'm using a jeweling set to push out a jewel setting, which is a proper thing to do, right? You could use a staking set to do that too, but you're pounding on it, and you're better off using a jeweling set to put just the right level of pressure on that particular jewel setting. All right, here's my jeweling set with all of the stumps and reamers and you name it, right? So I'm picking the right stump to use for this. It's got to have a hole big enough for the jewel and the setting to drop through, which is very important. So I think my camera froze for a second there, but that was the right stump right there. And it's got a brass ring around it. I think I used that for something else before. So here I've got the stump set up. I'm just making sure that pusher goes right through the center, and I don't have an issue here. And what I want to do is make sure that those regulator pins are clear of the stump as well, because I don't want to push down on that jewel and have crushed my regulator pins. So right now they are absolutely clear of the stump. So when I push down, I won't have an issue doing that. So I'm just remeasuring again and making sure that all works really well. So there we go. Let's just push this thing down and have a look at what I got. Now what happened here was that the jewel setting decided that it wanted to stay inside the stump, the stump rather. So it wasn't the setting itself, it was the cap jewel that decided it wanted to stay in there. So it wasn't really the same size or a bit bigger. It was just a little bit smaller, but there might have been something there keeping it from going in. So I tried poking it out with a brass poker that I made a while back, an out poker. It didn't work. There's a stump, and there's the cap jewel. So I said, okay, let me get my needle. I've got a bunch of what are they called? They're grips, right? And I put a needle in one of them, and then I used that needle on the edge to push it out. I wanted to make sure I didn't push that needle through the center. And there it is, dropped out very nicely, and verdun, as they say in Montreal, verdun. And now I've got to put all this away and start working on the balance. There's the balance sitting in the lighter fluid. Again, great. Like in the old days, the old watchmakers used lighter fluid all the time to clean pocket watches. They didn't have that fancy L&R $100 cleaning liquid. So they used lighter fluid. These are the old watchmakers back in the 1900s or even the 1800s. They always had lighter fluid because they were smoking a lot back then. So here I'm just making sure that the hairspring comes apart too. So I'm stretching it in a little bit, not stretching it, but picking it up by the stud and allowing it to come out, which is fine. It's been in that liquid for quite a while now. And then I said, okay, let's just throw the jewel setting with the jewel in it, and then the cap jewel. These are the upper balance jewel setting and the upper balance cap jewel. That upper balance jewel setting is probably 0.10 millimeters, the actual hole size, or 0.12 maybe. So I didn't need to measure this because I didn't have to do pivot work on this watch, but I go in there with a brush, a small brush, to just wipe away anything that might be, any grease or whatever that might be on the setting in the cap jewel. And that's what I've always done for cleaning these. And then because they're not going through the cleaning machine, and you just hold on to it with your tweezers and make sure it doesn't move much as you're just brushing it lightly. And later on, I also take the back of a piece of pegwood and I rub that cap jewel to get rid of a little bit of smudge that was on the cap jewel from a long time ago. The jewel itself was clean as a whistle. So I'm just getting rid of some lighter fluid here, and then I'll pick these things up and then put them on the watch paper. And they'll dry within 5-10 minutes. They're going to be dry as a whistle. And where that term came from, I do not know. Dry as a whistle. There's the thumb up. So I'll flip those around too, perhaps, to make sure they get dried on both sides. I may also hit them with the puffer. But in this case here, what I'm doing is tightening up the two screws that hold in the stud, the small plate that goes over the top, or bridge that goes over the top to hold in the hairspring stud. I just tighten those screws up so they don't come out while I'm playing with this. And then I take my brush and I also use a lighter fluid to clean off any dirt or anything basically any dirt, oils or anything else that's on the balance cock itself. So this is a pretty simple job. Got to flip that thing around, and perhaps should have taken out that piece of leather so it wasn't being part of this whole operation. But it kind of wasn't really in the way for me brushing this off. And what I want to do here is just make sure that where the hole is, where the jewel setting needs to go back in, that hole is spotless, and I don't have any grit in there when I push that back in. So I'm just getting some of the lighter fluid off that brush. Someday my computer is going to cause that brush to catch on fire and I'll be running around the house yelling. But for now, I'm good. So there we go, and I just put that down to dry, and I'll probably puff that thing out as well. Alright, now for some fun. So what I'm doing here is just puffing out the hairspring a bit. It'll dry on its own if you just let it sit there for an hour, but there's no need. And you don't want the balance to wiggle too much while you're doing this. It's probably not going to hurt it, but so what I did was I grounded the lower pivot on my mat. And again, it's these mats I get from the dollar store, and they're really good. And because of the design that's on those mats, the screws won't roll off the mat. They'll just stay in place, and the design is not deep enough to cause an issue, and it's not shallow enough to not work. So I just dried this off just a bit, put that back into place, and I'm just going to take the balance cock here and put it down on the mat again, and just dry some of the lighter fluid off of that too. So, and just it's over. You got to have control over doing this. I remember years and years ago when I was using the puffer and I didn't realize it, and I blew some screws off my desk. And you got to know where you're pointing the dangerous end of that puffer, because you'll end up on the floor looking for screws with a magnet for a week. So I'm very aware now of where my puffer is pointing. And the other thing I do now is I always move my parts up on the mat out of the way. As years ago, I also determined that my forearm is a magnet. So parts will stick to my forearm and then they'll end up somewhere else. So I try to keep parts out of the way. Here, my forearm won't go near the jewel settings and the two jewel settings. They won't go near that, so I'm not too concerned about anything happening there. So these settings, I'm just moving them. If you look in the upper right-hand corner, I'm just moving them out of the way a bit. And there we go. I'm just looking here to make sure that there's no issues. And as I looked in here, I examined it. What you do is you look at the reflection of the light on the setting, and make sure that you're getting a good mirrored look at that. But right now I'm just moving everything out of the way. And I can't remember what I'm doing here. Oh yeah, I need some more drying here. So let's dry this thing up a bit more. Again, you don't touch the part while you're drying it, because it'll mar or scratch the part, and you don't want that to happen. But this is just going to get the alcohol, or not the lighter fluid, to dry a lot quicker. Oh, and by the way, I don't use alcohol for this. I'm worried about the alcohol going near any shellac by accident, because I know the alcohol will affect the shellac and loosen that up. So if you want to remove shellac from a roller table, then use alcohol. It'll dissolve that shellac and you can clean it up with alcohol. But lighter fluid, for some reason, doesn't affect the shellac. And I was very concerned with it back in the day. So here I've got the regulator, right? So I want to make sure that this regulator, which is a very high-end one, that screw is actually touching the regulator arm. So I'm screwing it in, just make sure it's touching the arm. And I'm also thinking about how I'm going to put this assembly back together. Like, what is my technique going to be this time? So to actually put the balance with the spring on again, it can be tricky, right? But before I do that, I really need to put those jewel settings back in. And I know when I remove the regulator a bit, sometimes I'll snug that regulator right up against the where the stud is, and so it's easy for the hairspring to feed into the regulator pins. And sometimes I'll take it the other direction and really far away, because you've got a little bit of movement before that stud is tightened to allow you to tuck that spring in between the regulator pins. So here I'm just taking the balance, the upper balance jewel here in its setting, and I'm putting it in the hole in the balance cock. So again, here I'm making sure that the regulator pins are out of the way of that stump, so I don't accidentally push down and bend those regulator pins. So I've got it pretty much aligned here, and I'm going to give it a little bit of pressing down and look at the other side and make sure it's flush. So it looks like it's in nicely, and that's the value of using the jeweling tool, is that you can put very controlled pressure on that jewel setting. I've done it with pushers, manual pushers. This is a better method of doing it by far. So the other method is good. You gotta have a lot of patience to do it. So now here, what I want to do is put some 9010 oil, and I'm going to put it on the cap jewel. So some people will put that on the jewel setting itself with a hole. The proper way of doing this is actually putting it on the cap jewel and then rotating that cap and then putting the cap onto the balance cock. So you'll see what I'm doing here. I noticed that, like I said before, that I think I'll clean off the top of this again with the back of a piece of pegwood. And this is just a final cleaning of the cap to see if there's anything else. I look at the reflection of the cap on the light to make sure there's no dirt on it, because it's very small, so it's difficult to do unless you do that. And then go back in and clean it up a bit more. And I use the other end of this piece of pegwood in this case. I usually just use the back end, but I found a little piece of something there that I wanted to get rid of. This does a very good job of cleaning that cap jewel out, and that's absolutely necessary. There's little half moons on the cap jewel where the screws go in, and it's important to line those up so that when you actually put the cap jewel back on, the screws are actually aligning properly with those half moons as they go down, so they're set into that. So that's what I'm going to do next. All right, now we need to do a little close-up on that on the work here. So here's how you see me up in the upper right-hand corner. You put the jeweling or the oiler in, and you pull it out very slowly so it picks up the world's smallest piece of oil, and you put that little ball of oil on top of that jewel. You don't want to over oil that, right? If you pull that oiler out fast, it'll leave a ball of oil on the end of the oiler, and that'll transfer to that cap jewel. So you don't want to do that. You just want to do this, and then you turn the cap jewel around and align those little half moons with where the screw holes are. So that's what I'm doing here. This is a little bit tricky this time. Normally it just aligns perfectly and there's no issue. This time it was playing silly bugger. Normally I can put that cap jewel in and just nudge it where those half moons are. So this time I tried to grab it and then twist twist that, and it failed miserably. So I wasn't able to do that. So I'm just playing with it right now. So annoying me at this moment. So these jewel settings are gold jewel settings. It's a very high-end 21 jewel pocket watch. I believe the jewel settings were normally 9 karat flashed jewel settings. So I don't believe that they may be solid gold from back then, but they're 9 karat because it's hard enough to work with. If you try to get a softer or higher carat jewel gold in there, then that gold will be too soft to work with. So these are 9 karat gold. So if someone can actually correct me, because I know there's a lot of aficionados out there. So here it's lined up, and it's lined up good enough. I think I actually put it in backwards, but it was fine once I screwed it down. Backwards meaning the half moons left and right were on the wrong side, but it was no issue. So now I'm going to push that in. Now what I don't want to do is scratch that jewel setting, right? Because it's a very beautiful cap jewel setting for the upper cap jewel of the balance. So I want to make sure it's lined up to start off with, so I don't have an issue. And again, keeping the regulator. And I cut the world's smallest piece of paper to put over that. This is watchmaker's paper. You got to get yourself some watchmaker's paper. And I put that watchmaker's paper over that jewel setting, so when I push that down with the pusher, it's not going to scratch that setting, because the pusher would in fact scratch the setting unless I had something between it, right, between the pusher and the setter, or the setting. And the Seats jeweling tool is superb. You've got to get one of those if you don't have one. You can probably find them on eBay pretty easily. So that's me pushing down. I'm aligning it up because I can't see it right now, but I kind of know where it is. And again, being very aware of where those regulator pins are. So I push that down. Now I'm going to take a look and see if that setting is flush. So it just needs to be flush, and if that's flush, then it's in all the way. If it's not flush, I have to push harder, or there's a gap between the cap jewel and the jewel itself, the upper balance jewel. Or if it doesn't push in all the way, then the actual jewel setting below it wasn't pushed in all the way. So you'd have to push them both out again afterward. So here I've got to replace the screws that go in to hold that upper cap jewel setting. I think I dropped one of them somewhere, but there we go. You got to be able to rotate your tweezers with the world's smallest jewel in those tweezers, just like I did. So you saw a good example. You want to back that up of exactly how I'm able to hold on to that screw while rotating my tweezers. So I'm getting my screwdriver in here and very carefully tightening that, so it's nice down and flush. And that's number one. And I think in number two, I dropped that and it ended up in the regulator. I'm like, damn, how did I do that? So I tried to grab it again. It wasn't grabbable. So what you do there is just figure out how to move it a bit and then dump it. That's the best technique. Don't keep trying to poke at it. If you do that, it's going to end up on the carpet, and you're going to spend your afternoon looking for the world's smallest screw. And you've seen in my other videos how I go screw hunting. And oh, by the way, I'm screwing it in now. Make sure you like and share and subscribe to my channel, and like these watch repair videos. I enjoy doing them, and I enjoy making them. This time I've had to do a bit of a dub over on this one here because I screwed up the mic when I was actually doing the video, so it's dubbed over, which is fine. And there we go, the two jewels, the actual, there's the thumb up. So we've got those two in, and now I'm going to put the balance stud back in. So I ended up using my stereo microscope to do this, but what I did was I put the balance onto my metal block, as you can see, and then I used one of my gripping devices that I have. That's really handy because you can use that with one hand and slide that little sleeve forward to tighten it up. So I just did that to grip the balance cock itself, and then I went into my stereo microscope and was able to very easily insert that stud in and make sure the hairspring was aligned properly. I just continued to rotate it until it was aligned, and then did it with the stereo microscope. Very hard to record that, and it's not necessary. So here I've got that little pad, put that back, and I want that balance cock back on that balance hole tack, and then there we go. I got that, trying to find the hole here. So gonna find the hole, get those glasses on, and rest it on the balance tack. Anyway, thanks for watching this video. I hope you enjoyed it. This is the right way to clean a balance cock and a balance itself and a hairspring. So if you follow this technique, you're not going to go wrong. And I'll see you next time. Hey, and a really big thanks for watching my video, and have a wonderful day.